In this video, I want to talk about imposter syndrome because I know a lot of gifted people struggle with it, and so do I. Did you know there's a connection between anxieties, depression, perfectionism, and imposter syndrome? There is. So it's not weird that many gifted people struggle with imposter syndrome, as a lot of gifted people also struggle with anxieties, depression, or perfectionism, or all of them. I've had imposter syndrome for as long as I can remember. I want to focus on what imposter syndrome is in this video, and in my next video, I'm going to share my own experiences with imposter syndrome. So let's start the show. What is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is a psychological occurrence in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Despite external evidence of their competence, those experiencing this phenomenon do not believe they deserve their success or luck. They may incorrectly attribute it to the privileges they were born with, or they may think that they are deceiving others because they feel like they are not as intelligent as they outwardly portray themselves to be. You might have imposter syndrome if you find yourself consistently experiencing self-doubt, even in areas where you typically excel. Imposter syndrome may feel like restlessness and nervousness, and it may manifest as negative self-talk. Symptoms of anxiety and depression often accompany imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is not a diagnosable mental illness. Instead, the term is usually narrowly applied to intelligence and achievement, although it also has links to perfectionism and the social context. Psychologists Susanna Imes and Pauline Rose Clance first used this term in the 1970s. What are signs of imposter syndrome? Originally, the concept of imposter syndrome was thought to apply mostly to high-achieving women. Since then, it's been recognized as a more widely experienced phenomenon. Imposter syndrome can affect anyone, no matter their social status, work background, skill level, or degree of expertise. If you wonder whether you might have imposter syndrome, ask yourself the following 5 questions. 1. Do you agonize over even the smallest flaws or mistakes in your work? 2. Do you attribute your success to luck or outside factors? 3. Are you sensitive to even constructive criticism? 4. Do you feel like you will inevitably be found out as a phony? And 5. Do you downplay your own expertise, even in areas where you are genuinely more skilled than others? If you do all these things, you most probably have imposter syndrome. What are types of imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome can be broken down into 5 basic types. 1. The perfectionist. This type of imposter syndrome involves believing that unless you were absolutely perfect, you could have done better. You feel like an imposter because your perfectionistic traits make you believe that you're not as good as others might think you are. 2. The expert. The expert feels like an imposter because they don't know everything there is to know about a particular subject or topic, or they haven't mastered every step in a process. Because there is more for them to learn, they don't feel as if they've reached the rank of expert. 3. The natural genius. In this imposter syndrome type, you may feel like a fraud simply because you don't believe that you are naturally intelligent or competent. If you don't get something right the first time around, or it takes you longer to master a skill, you feel like an imposter. 4. The soloist. It's also possible to feel like an imposter if you had to ask for help to reach a certain level or status. Since you couldn't get there on your own, you question your competence or abilities. 5. The super person. This type of imposter syndrome involves believing that you must be the hardest worker or reach the highest levels of achievement possible, and if you don't, you are a fraud. What are characteristics of imposter syndrome? Here are 8 common characteristics of imposter syndrome. 1. An inability to realistically assess your competence and skills. 2. Attributing your success to external factors. 3. Berating your performance. 4. Fear that you won't live up to expectations. 5. Overachieving. 6. Sabotaging your own success. 7. Self-doubt. And 8. Setting very challenging goals and feeling disappointed when you fall short. What's the impact of imposter syndrome? For some people, imposter syndrome can fuel motivation to achieve, but this usually comes at the cost of experiencing constant anxiety. You might over-prepare or work much harder than necessary, for instance, to make sure no one finds out you are a fraud. Eventually, anxiety worsens and may lead to depression. This sets up a vicious cycle in which you think that the only reason you survived that presentation was that you stayed up all night rehearsing. Or you think the only reason you got through that party was that you memorized details about all the guests, so you would always have ideas for small talk. The problem with imposter syndrome is that the experience of doing well at something does nothing to change your beliefs. The thought still nags in your head, what gives me the right to be here? The more you accomplish, the more you feel like a fraud. It's like you can't internalize your experiences of success. This makes sense in terms of social anxiety if you received early feedback that you were not good in social or performance situations, and a lot of us gifted people feel we aren't good in social settings. When you have imposter syndrome, the core beliefs about yourself are so strong they don't change, even when there is evidence to the contrary. The thought process is that when you do well, it must be the result of luck. People who experience imposter syndrome tend not to talk about how they are feeling with anyone and struggle in silence, just like us who have social anxiety disorder. This creates loneliness. What are examples of imposter syndrome? Here are 3 examples of what it's like to experience imposter syndrome. 1. You've been working in a certain role for a couple of months, yet when people call you by your formal title, you feel like a fraud because you feel you haven't mastered that position. 2. You've started your own business, however, you don't like to promote yourself because you don't have the same level of experience or expertise as others in your field, and that makes you feel like a fraud. 3. You've been nominated for an award or won a prize, but you feel like an imposter at the recognition ceremony because you don't feel that your achievements are good enough to warrant the nomination. This information came from these websites. You'll find these links below this video. If you found this video interesting, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment in the comment section below. Subscribe to my channel and watch this series from the start. In 2 weeks, I'll be back with a new video well, it mightn't be in 2 weeks. No, it's not in 2 weeks. I am sorry. In 3 weeks, I'll be back with a new video in this series on intellectual giftedness. Till then, I only want to say 3 things. Thank you for watching. Take care and bye for now.